Tell me, how did this come to be? In our family, my thoughts are no longer safe. The moment I don't share your faith, I still believed, but needed to authenticate the life.
Proud. So, this is the song is the kicker for me. Proud is about how I used to have pride in being a Christian and how I used to have pride in being the brother of my siblings. This song was a long time coming, and as I was writing it, trying to figure out how to say certain things, I rewrote a lot of it, and when I got to the point where I knew I wanted to talk about my family, I was like, okay, how does this make me feel? I don't know, how do I feel? I feel like things used to be better. Yeah, things did used to be better. What did I used to feel before with regard to my family and all that? Oh yeah, I used to be really, and as soon as that word proud came into my mind, I just broke down and cried my eyes out, because that was really what I don't have anymore, and it was really what I cherished before. I tried singing the chorus and I kept breaking into tears while singing it, and it took me a while to get it out, but I finally got it out. If you would ask me, you know, when I was younger, if I would ever be making a song like Proud, I would have said, hell no. Proud is my farewell, basically. Farewell to a deity that I am not convinced exists, and a deity who, quite frankly, if it did exist, I would not be drawn to follow or worship that deity. There's so much more than just whether or not a God exists. God really needs to have merit, and I'm not convinced. The belief in God was the last thing that I held on to. It took me just over a decade to let go of that. You know, stopping going to church was one of the first things, because I've done that my whole life, and there's really nothing new that ever circulates within Christianity. You're just essentially regurgitating the same things and finding new ways to say the exact same thing over and over again, because it all ultimately stems from this one book that will no longer change apart from just translation. It took me a while to admit that I wasn't convinced. It took me a while to publicly admit that I wasn't convinced anymore, and it took me a while to write a song about it. So this is progress for me. To Christians who know me, they will obviously think it's the exact opposite, but quite frankly, I don't give a shit. I'm not necessarily doing a farewell to my family. That's not what I want, but the pride definitely is gone. I used to tell people about my siblings all the time, even during my darker period when I was on my own. I would still, if they came up in conversation, I would talk about them in a way that I was proud because of how good they were interpersonally, or athletically, or intellectually, or how we might have been there for each other, you know, after our mom died or whatever. Somewhere along the line, I started to see how paper-thin religion made our connections. It's sickening to me that someone can not become a murderer, not become a rapist, not become a genocidal maniac or anything like that. Just, they simply stop becoming convinced for reasons that at the time are pretty much always bewildering to them, and it's something they want to figure out. How going through that immediately warrants this different perspective on that person. All of a sudden, their thinking crosses over into dangerous territory. All of a sudden, the mind that was being trusted to be discerning, not without mistakes, but generally discerning and maybe intuitive and generally good-willed, this mind all of a sudden crosses over into this dark territory, apparently, the moment you start to doubt or behave differently or flat out stop believing that this somehow makes you an enemy a spiritual enemy, that this somehow makes you deceived without any investigation whatsoever into what you actually are going through. And when investigations are done, when questions are asked, it's done with a lens that is not in any way designed to understand non-religious people. Their lens is designed to see the world a certain way already. I was shown what religion turned our relationships into without me even trying to find out. I had to go from really believing that my family, and in particular my siblings, were the ones I could count on the most. I was the youngest in our immediate family, and there were plenty of times that they were there for me, that we were there for each other. And I had to go through the experience of believing that that was unconditional, and then learning that it wasn't. Learning that it was conditional upon believing the same things that they believed. And that's an oversimplification, one that they probably wouldn't agree with. But fundamentally, that's all it is. If it was ultimately about any more than that, they would have had a genuine interest in simply understanding me when these things started to happen, when my doubts started to happen. But I didn't get that. I suddenly fit the bill of something dangerous and deceptive in their mind. And suddenly I was being talked to the way that I realized we talked about non-Christians. All of a sudden I was a different person to them. And here I was on a journey to become genuine in ways that every Christian should champion. And again, it's the hardest thing in the world to get religious people to understand. When I told my story to non-Christians, before I even get out the first couple sentences, they're like, oh yeah, and they'd be able to paraphrase it in their own words without my help whatsoever, and my mind would be blown, because I had spent years off and on trying to get my family to understand what I was trying to do. I didn't always explain it well. I was trying to figure it out for myself. I definitely didn't always make good decisions about it, but ultimately, how the fuck do you believe something that causes you to treat your family in a way that you know is not right? How does something get you to a place cognitively where you can look at your flesh and blood in peril and in need of support, not in need of being told what to do, not in need of being told that they're backslidden and that they weren't raised that way and that they should know better and all that bullshit? How does something make you look at a person who needs proper understanding and support and see them as a spiritual enemy, as somebody who's been duped, as somebody who's alien? So I'm not proud. I have a lot of high regard for aspects of my siblings and for the rest of my family, and I hate the state that the relationships are in. But what I will not do is pretend. I will not pretend like they didn't make my life a fucking miserable hell for years. I won't pretend like they didn't make me feel like I didn't matter. I won't pretend like the most important things about myself, about my identity, about what I was trying to do didn't matter. I won't pretend like everything's okay when it's not. I won't pretend like I'm comfortable with everyday casualness when I never had to settle for that before with them. I didn't have to settle for that when I was younger. Why the fuck should I have to settle for that now? I got to have more from them as a child, and I sure as fucking shit deserve that now. I don't deserve something superficial. Neither do they. But where do we reconnect? Where do we reconcile? I dread that conversation. I yearn for it and I dread it. I yearn for resolution, but I dread what I know it would be attempting it. I dread an emphasis of misunderstanding. I dread revisiting what it felt like to look my siblings in the eye and not feel connected. And again, not because of anything that should matter more than our relationship. Difference in belief. Unbelievable. I'm not going to apologize for making it on my own. I'm not going to apologize for doing what I needed to do to stop the noise that they were causing in my head. I never asked for it to be this way. When this all started out, I reached out. Not just to them, but to other Christians as well. I reached out, and I got zero understanding and support. The only support I got was from one or two people, good friends who grew up in the church and who were just naturally inclined to understand that no matter what conversation you have, no matter what the differences are, people matter. And you never put anything above understanding another person. Josh Harding is one of those people, so I appreciate you, Josh. I also don't apologize for this song, Proud. Anyways, that's it. And if proud is something you can relate to in any way, definitely let me know.